The dominion of the 12 spheres had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their power was absolute. Their word was law. And their punishment was always cruel. When the Volari people asked for freedom, the High Tribunal decided to teach them a lesson. The Volari were a peaceful species with soft blue skin and large dark eyes. They had lived under Dominion rule for centuries, always quiet, always obedient. But 5 years ago, they had sent a petition asking for independence. They wanted to govern themselves. They wanted to be free. The tribunal could have simply killed them. That would have been easy. But death was too quick, too clean. The tribunal wanted the Volari to suffer slowly. They wanted other species to watch and learn what happened to those who asked for too much, so they came up with a different plan. On a cold morning in March, the sky above Earth turned dark. People in every country looked up and saw thousands of metal pods falling through the clouds. The pods were ugly and gray, built not for comfort but for shame. They were cargo containers, the kind used to transport animals or waste. Inside those pods were 6 million Volari refugees. The Dominion broadcast their message to every screen on Earth. A tall figure in golden robes appeared, his face cold and proud. "Humans of Earth," he said, "you have refused to join our Dominion. You have called yourselves independent. Very well. Let us see how independent you truly are. We give you these Volari as a gift. They are criminals and troublemakers. They are your problem now. Deal with them as you wish." The transmission ended. The pods continued to fall. In New York, a pod crashed into Central Park. In Tokyo, 3 pods landed in the bay. In Cairo, pods scattered across the desert outside the city. Everywhere, all at once, the Volari arrived. The Dominion expected panic. They expected riots. They expected humans to turn on each other, fighting over resources. They expected humanity to come crawling back, begging to join the Dominion in exchange for help. They did not expect Dr. Amara Chen. Amara was 52 years old. She had spent her life working in disaster response, helping people after earthquakes and floods and wars. She had seen the worst of humanity, but she had also seen the best. She knew what people could do when they chose to help each other. 6 hours after the first pod landed, Amara stood in front of the United Nations. World leaders watched her on screens from every continent. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some had already started blaming each other. Amara raised her hand for silence. "I know you are afraid," she said. "I am afraid too. We did not ask for this. We did not want this. But these people did not choose this either. They are cold. They are hungry. They are terrified. They have lost everything." She paused and looked directly at the camera. "We can argue about politics later. We can worry about resources later. Right now, there are 6 million people who need our help, and I believe we are good enough to give it." The room was silent for a long moment. Then the Prime Minister of Canada spoke. "What do you need?" Within 12 hours, the world began to move. In São Paulo, firefighters cut open a cargo pod that had landed in a football stadium. Inside, they found 200 Volari huddled together in the dark. The Volari had no idea where they were. They did not speak any human language. They had been told that humans were primitive and violent, that they would be killed or enslaved. A firefighter named Carlos was the first to step inside the pod. He was a big man with a thick beard and gentle hands. He had been a firefighter for 20 years. He had pulled people from burning buildings and collapsed bridges. But he had never seen anything like this. The Volari pressed against the far wall, their large eyes wide with terror. One of them was a small girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She had pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in the dark. She was holding on to an older woman, probably her mother. Carlos did not have words they could understand. He did not have any way to explain that he meant no harm. So he did the only thing he could think of. He knelt down, making himself smaller. He held out his hand, palm up, the way you might approach a frightened animal, and he smiled. The little girl looked at him for a long time. Then, slowly she let go of her mother. She took one step forward. Then another. Her small hand reached out and touched his fingers. Carlos felt tears running down his face. He did not wipe them away. "It's okay," he said softly, knowing she could not understand. "You're safe now. I promise." Someone behind him was filming. That video would be seen by 3 billion people before the day was over. It would become the symbol of humanity's response to the Valari crisis. But in that moment, Carlos was not thinking about the world. He was thinking about a scared little girl who needed someone to be kind. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. In Mumbai, restaurant owners brought food to the pods, not knowing what the Valari could eat, but wanting to offer something. In Berlin, medical students formed teams to assess the refugees' health. In rural Canada, farmers opened their barns as temporary shelters. Not everyone was kind. There were protests in some cities. Some politicians gave angry speeches about the burden, about the danger, about the unfairness of it all. These voices were loud, and they were real, but they were not the majority. What surprised everyone, including the humans themselves, was how many people simply wanted to help. Ordinary people. Teachers and truck drivers and store clerks. People who had never thought about aliens or space politics. They saw frightened strangers, and something deep inside them said, "Help them." Within a week, United Earth Response Coalition had been formed. Amara Chen was named its director. Every country contributed what they could. Rich nations sent money and equipment. Smaller nations sent volunteers and expertise. Even countries that had been enemies for decades found themselves working side by side. The Valari did not know what to make of it. They had been taught that other species were dangerous. They had been told that humans were especially primitive, barely more than animals. But these animals were bringing them blankets. These primitives were learning their language. These dangerous creatures were singing to their children to help them sleep. High above Earth, Dominion observers watched and recorded everything. They sent their reports back to the tribunal with growing confusion. "The humans are not fighting," one report said. "They are cooperating." "The humans are not angry at the Valari," said another. "They are angry at us." "Something is wrong," said a third. "This is not what we predicted." The High Tribunal read these reports and dismissed them. Humans were simple creatures. They would fail eventually. It was only a matter of time before their kindness ran out. But as the weeks passed, something strange began to happen. The Valari started to smile. Their children started to laugh. And on the streets of 100 human cities, people who had never met before began to see each other as neighbors. The Dominion had sent the Valari to Earth as punishment. They did not realize they had just planted a seed. 3 months had passed. Since the Valari arrived on Earth, the initial chaos had settled into something that looked almost like normal life. Refugee camps had become small towns. Temporary shelters had become homes. And the Dominion's observers were more confused than ever. Ambassador Torvik sat in his ship high above Earth, reading report after report. He was supposed to document humanity's failure. He was supposed to watch their society crack under the weight of 6 million hungry mouths. Instead, he was watching something he could not explain. The humans were not just feeding the Valari. They were teaching them in Mumbai. A 73-year-old woman named Priya Sharma had turned her small house into a school. Every morning, 30 Valari adults would walk through her door to learn Hindi. They sat on cushions on her floor, practicing words while she served them tea. In exchange, the Valari taught her their own language. It's a beautiful flowing script that looked like frozen music. Priya had been a school teacher for 40 years before she retired. When asked why she spent her days teaching aliens for free, she laughed. "What else would I do? Sit and watch television. These people need to talk to their neighbors. That is more important than my rest." The children learned faster than the adults. Within weeks, Valari children were speaking broken English and playing games with human children in the streets. They taught each other. Human children learned Valari songs. Valari children learned to play football. Neither group cared that they looked different. Children rarely do, but not everything was easy. The Valari could not survive in direct sunlight. Their skin would burn within minutes under Earth's sun. This was a serious problem in many parts of the world. How could they live normal lives if they could not go outside during the day? In Montana, a small farming community, faced this challenge directly. Their town had accepted 2,000 Valari refugees. The farmers were practical people. They did not waste time complaining about problems. They solved them. Within a month, they had built an entirely new greenhouse district. The buildings had special glass that filtered the harmful rays while letting in softer light. The Valari could live and work inside these structures safely. They started growing their own food, plants from seeds they had hidden in their clothes when they fled their homeworld. The farmers worked 18-hour days to finish the project. When asked why they worked so hard for strangers, an old farmer named Thomas wiped sweat from his forehead and shrugged. They needed help. We knew how to build. That is all there is to it. Similar stories appeared everywhere. In Lagos, engineers worked day and night to understand Valari biology so they could build proper medical equipment. In Japan, textile workers created new clothing that protected Valari's skin from sunlight. In Brazil, architects designed homes that met Valari needs while fitting into human neighborhoods. The Valari noticed all of this. They had spent centuries under Dominion rule, being told they were worthless. They had been treated as servants at best, as animals at worst. Now, for the first time, people were going out of their way to make them comfortable. Not because they had to. Because they wanted to. A Valari healer named Sorian lived in a small town in Germany. She had been a doctor on her homeworld, respected and skilled. When the Dominion exiled her people, she thought her life was over. What use was a Valari doctor on a primitive planet? But the humans did not see her as useless. They saw her as a treasure. Sorian's knowledge of biology was centuries ahead of human medicine. She could look at cells and see things human doctors missed. She understood how bodies worked at a level that seemed like magic to her new neighbors. One day, Mother brought her child to the refugee center, where Sorian worked. The child was human, a small boy with pale skin and tired eyes. He had a form of blood cancer that human doctors could not cure. His mother had heard that the Valari healer might help. She was desperate. Sorian examined the boy carefully. She ran tests using a mixture of human equipment and Valari techniques. After an hour, she looked up with surprise in her eyes. "I can fix this," she said. "This disease, we cured it on my world long ago. The treatment is simple for me." The mother started crying. She grabbed Sorian's hands and held them tight. "Please," she said. "Please save my son." Sorian worked for 3 days without sleep. She taught the human doctors what to do. She guided them through procedures they had never imagined. And on the 3rd day, the boy opened his eyes and asked for food. The news spread like fire. A Valari refugee had cured cancer. Not all cancer, not yet, but one kind. And she was teaching humans how to do it themselves. Sorian became famous overnight. Reporters came from everywhere, asking for interviews. But what affected her most was not the cameras or the praise. It was what the mother said to her after her son was healed. "Thank you for being here," the mother whispered through her tears. "Thank you for coming to Earth." For the first time since her exile, Sorian wept. Not from sadness, but from something she had forgotten how to feel. On her homeworld, no one had ever thanked her for simply existing. No one had ever suggested that her presence was a gift. The Dominion had made her people feel like a burden to everyone around them. But this human woman, this stranger, was grateful that Sorian existed. That night, Sorian wrote in her journal, "I think I finally understand these humans. They do not see helping others as a cost. They see it as a privilege. Of course, not everything was perfect. Some humans still protested. Some shouted that the Valari were stealing jobs and resources. Some demanded that they be sent back to space. In Berlin, a large protest formed outside a refugee center. Angry people waved signs and shouted cruel words. Inside the center, Valari families huddled together, scared that the violence would break out. But then something happened that the Dominion observers could not understand. A counter-protest appeared, 3 times larger than the first group. Humans and Valari standing together, holding signs in both languages. Some signs said "Refugees welcome," others said "We stand together." A few simply said "Love wins." The angry protesters found themselves surrounded by kindness. Not by violence or force, just by thousands of people who quietly, firmly disagreed with hate. Ambassador Torvik watched the footage from his ship. He had seen many things in his centuries of service to the Dominion. He had seen wars and rebellions and the rise and fall of empires, but he had never seen anything like this. He began writing his report to the tribunal, then stopped. He did not know what to say. The Dominion's entire understanding of the universe was based on one simple truth. Different species could not live together in peace. Without the Dominion's iron hand, chaos would always win. But here was Earth. Here were humans, treating strangers as family. Here was chaos choosing kindness. Torvik deleted his report and started again. This time, he wrote a single sentence that would eventually reach the High Tribunal and disturb their sleep for years to come. The humans have a word that we do not. They call it compassion, and I believe it may be more powerful than anything we have. 1 year had passed since the Valari fell from the sky. The world had changed in ways no one expected, least of all the Dominion. Counselor Mira sat in a quiet office in Geneva, waiting for the Secretary General of the United Nations. She was the closest thing the Valari had to a leader now, chosen by her people to speak for them in this strange new world. A year ago, she had been a librarian on her homeworld, caring for ancient books and avoiding politics. Now, she carried the hopes of 6 million refugees on her shoulders. The door opened, and Secretary General David Okonkwo walked in. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He had been a teacher before becoming a diplomat, and he still spoke like one. Choosing his words carefully and listening more than he talked, "Counselor Myra," he said warmly, shaking her hand, "thank you for coming. Please, sit." They sat across from each other at a simple wooden table. No cameras, no reporters. Just two leaders trying to understand what came next. "I have read your report," David said. "I have to admit I was surprised." Myra nodded. She had spent weeks preparing this report, gathering data from Valari communities around the world. The results had surprised her too. "We are not just surviving," she said. "We are contributing." The numbers were remarkable. In the years since their arrival, Valari scientists had helped increase Earth's solar panel efficiency by 40%. Their understanding of crystals and light was centuries ahead of human technology. They had shared this knowledge freely, asking for nothing in return except a place to live. Valari farmers had introduced new growing techniques that worked in dry climates. Countries that had struggled with food shortages were now producing more than they needed. Valari doctors had begun teaching at human universities, passing on medical knowledge that was saving thousands of lives every month. But the report contained more than just numbers. It told stories in Singapore. A new university had opened. It was the first school designed for both humans and Valari to learn together. Human students studied Valari art and science. Valari students learned Earth history and languages. The graduation rate was the highest in the world because students helped each other. If one person struggled, others would stay late to explain the lesson again. In Argentina, a Valari musician named Korith had created something entirely new. He had learned to play human instruments and combine them with Valari harmonics, sounds that humans could not make with their own voices. His concerts sold out within minutes. People cried when they heard his music because it made them feel emotions they could not name. In 100 small towns and large cities, Valari and humans were building lives together. They were opening businesses, raising families, creating art. The fear that had existed in those first weeks had slowly transformed into something else. "Your people have given us so much," David said quietly. "I am not sure we deserve it." Myra shook her head. "You gave us something first. You gave us hope." She leaned forward, her large dark eyes serious. "Counselor, I need you to understand something. Under the Dominion, we forgot who we were. They told us we were weak. They told us we were useless without their guidance. After enough years, we believed them." "Oh." She paused, gathering her words. "Your people reminded us of the truth. We were builders once, healers, dreamers. The Dominion beat those things out of us. But they were still there, sleeping. Your kindness woke them up. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. I think kindness woke something in us too. He was right. The arrival of the Volari had changed humanity as well. Before the refugees came, humans had been divided. Nations fought over borders and resources. People argued about small differences while ignoring what they shared. The planet was full of old anger and older wounds. The Volari gave humanity a reason to come together. For the first time in history, every nation worked toward the same goal. They shared food and medicine and knowledge. They solved problems together that they could never have solved alone. And somewhere along the way, they started to like each other. Old enemies became partners. Countries that had not spoken in decades opened new channels of communication. People who had grown up hating their neighbors began to see them differently. If humans could welcome aliens, surely they could welcome each other. The Dominion had expected Earth to tear itself apart. Instead, Earth had begun to heal. Of course, the Dominion was paying attention. Their spies and observers sent regular reports back to the High Tribunal. At first, the Tribunal had dismissed these reports as exaggeration. Surely the humans would fail eventually. Surely their kindness would run out. But the months passed, and the humans did not fail. The Volari did not riot or rebel. The predicted economic collapse never came. In fact, the opposite happened. Earth's economy was growing faster than ever before. Volari technology mixed with human creativity was producing innovations that the galaxy had never seen. New medicines, new energy sources, new ways of building and growing and living. The primitive planet was advancing at a speed that made Dominion economists nervous. High Tribune Kethver summoned his advisors for a secret meeting. He was an old creature, ancient even by Dominion standards. He had ruled the 12 spheres for 300 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. He had never lost. Explain this to me, he demanded, throwing the latest reports onto the table. How are they succeeding? We sent them 6 million mouths to feed. We sent them the burden of our troublemakers. They should be begging for help by now. His chief advisor, a thin creature named Vel, shook his head slowly. Tribune, I do not have an explanation. Our models were wrong. Our predictions failed. Then fix them. Find out what we missed. Vel hesitated. Tribune, I believe I know what we missed. But you will not like the answer. Kethver glared at him. Speak. We assumed that compassion was weakness. We assumed that helping others would drain their resources and divide their attention. This is what our society teaches. This is what we have believed for 10,000 years. Vel paused, choosing his next words carefully. But the humans do not see it that way. For them, helping others is a source of strength. It unites them. It motivates them. The more they give, the stronger they become. The room was silent. Kethver stared at his advisor with cold eyes. You are telling me, he said slowly, that kindness is a weapon? Vel nodded. The most powerful weapon we have ever seen, and we have no defense against it. Back on Earth, Mira and David finished their meeting with a handshake and a promise. The Volari would continue to share their knowledge. The humans would continue to share their world. Together, they would build something new. As Mira walked out into the Geneva sunshine, wearing special clothing to protect her skin, she looked up at the blue sky. Somewhere beyond those clouds, the Dominion was watching. She knew they were afraid, even if they would not admit it. Good, she thought. They should be afraid, not of weapons, not of violence, but of something they had spent 10,000 years trying to destroy. Hope. 3 years after the Volari arrived on Earth, High Tribune Kethver stood before the assembled leaders of the 12 spheres. His golden robes shimmered under the lights of the great hall. His face showed no emotion, but inside he was afraid. The other leaders sat in a wide circle around him. They represented the most powerful species in the galaxy. For 10,000 years, they had ruled together under the Dominion's banner. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed every rebellion. They had built an empire that stretched across the stars, and now, for the first time in their long history, they did not know what to do. We have a problem, Kethver said. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. A problem we did not expect. He pressed a button, and images appeared in the air before them. Documents, requests, petitions. 14 of them, each bearing the official seal of a different species under Dominion control. 14 species have formally requested refugee status on Earth. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Leaders shouted questions at each other. Some stood from their seats in disbelief. Possible, said Tribune Res of the Malari. Why would anyone want to live on that primitive rock? Because of the stories, Kethfer replied. Stories that have spread across every world in our dominion. Stories about a place where different species live together, where no one is forced to work, where children laugh and play without fear. He paused, letting the words sink in. Stories about kindness. The hall fell silent. Kindness was not a word the Dominion used often. It was considered a weakness, something that held species back from true strength. The Dominion's power was built on fear and control. They had always believed that different species could not coexist without an iron hand to guide them. But Earth was proving them wrong. Tribune Vel, Kethfer's chief advisor, stepped forward with more reports. The situation is worse than the petitions suggest, he said. Our young people are changing. They share human music through secret networks. They discuss human philosophy in hidden gatherings. There is a word spreading through our empire. A human word. What word? Asked Tribune Res. Ubuntu, Vel said. It is an African concept. It means that a person becomes a person through other people. That we are all connected. That helping others is not weakness, but the source of our humanity. He shook his head slowly. Our youth have turned it into a symbol of rebellion. They write it on walls. They whisper it in schools. They use it as a greeting among themselves. Kethfer felt his anger rising. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had controlled what its subjects thought. They controlled the schools, the media, the very words people were allowed to speak. And now, a single primitive planet was undoing all of that work. There is more, Vel continued. Our scientists have analyzed the technology coming from Earth. The innovations produced by human-Velari cooperation. Tribune, in 3 years, they have advanced further than we have in 3 centuries. That is impossible, said Tribune, Wrath of the Cathani. We have the best scientists in the galaxy. We have obedient scientists, Vel corrected. Scientists who are afraid to fail. Scientists who only work on approved projects. The humans are different. They encourage wild ideas. They celebrate failure as a step toward success. And the Velari, freed from our control, have remembered how to dream again. The hall was quiet. Every leader understood what this meant. If Earth continued on this path, they would soon be more advanced than the Dominion itself. And if other species saw that advancement, more would want to leave. The trickle of refugees would become a flood. Ambassador Torvik, who had watched Earth since the beginning, was called to speak. He walked to the center of the hall with slow steps. He looked tired, older than his years. I have observed Earth for 3 years, he said. I have written hundreds of reports, and I must tell you the truth, even if it is not what you want to hear. He looked around at the assembled leaders. We made a terrible mistake. We sent the Velari to Earth as punishment. We expected the humans to drown under the weight of 6 million refugees. Instead, they built a bridge, and now the whole galaxy wants to cross it. Tribune Res slammed his fist on the table. Then we destroy the bridge. We have fleets. We have weapons. We can turn Earth to glass in a matter of days. Several leaders nodded in agreement. It was the obvious solution, the Dominion way. When something threatened your power, you destroyed it. But Kethfer raised his hand for silence. And then what? He asked, We have spent 10,000 years teaching our subjects that the Dominion is inevitable, that no one can stand against us, that there is no alternative to our rule. He pointed at the petitions floating in the air. If we destroy Earth, we prove the humans right. We prove that we are afraid of kindness. We prove that their way of life is a threat to ours. Every species in our dominion will see our fear. Every rebel, every dissident, every dreamer will know that there was another way. That we destroyed it not because it was wrong, but because it was working. The hall was silent. Kethfer looked at each leader in turn. We cannot destroy Earth, he said. But we cannot allow it to continue either. We are trapped. Tribune Vel cleared his throat. There may be another option. We could try to integrate Earth into the Dominion peacefully. Offer them membership. Bring them under our control through diplomacy instead of force. Kethfer almost laughed. You think they would accept? After what we did to the Valari? After we dumped 6 million refugees on their planet and called it a gift? He shook his head. No, the humans will never join us. And worse, they do not need to fight us. They just need to exist. As long as Earth remains free, it will be a symbol. A beacon. A reminder that there is another way to live. That night, Kethfer stood alone in his chambers, looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness was Earth, a tiny blue planet that should have meant nothing. Instead, it had become the greatest threat the Dominion had ever faced. Not because of weapons or armies, but because of an idea that people of different species could live together in peace. That helping others made you stronger, not weaker. That kindness was not a weakness, but a choice. For the first time in his 300 years of rule, Kethfer did not know how to win. Back on Earth, life continued. Valari children walked to school with their human friends. Scientists from both species worked together in labs, making discoveries that changed the world. Musicians played concerts that made audiences weep with joy. Families shared meals and stories and dreams. None of them knew about the debate happening in the halls of the Dominion. None of them knew that their simple acts of kindness were shaking the foundations of a 10,000-year empire. They were just living, just being good to each other, just proving every single day that there was another way, and that, perhaps, was the most powerful thing of all. 5 years had passed since the Valari fell from the sky. The world had changed so much that sometimes people forgot what it had been like before. The fear and confusion of those early days seemed like a distant dream. In its place was something new, something stronger, something the galaxy had never seen. Ambassador Amara Chen stood in the dressing room of a Dominion diplomatic vessel, adjusting her collar. She was 60 years old now. Her hair had gone gray at the temples. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. 5 years ago, she had been the first to stand before the world and ask for compassion. Now she was about to stand before the galaxy and offer something even more dangerous, an invitation. The door opened, and Counselor Myra entered. The Valari leader had changed over the years. She walked taller now. Her eyes, once full of fear, now held a quiet confidence. Are you ready? Mira asked. Amara smiled. No. But when has that ever stopped us? They walked together through the corridors of the ship. Guards watched them pass, their faces unreadable. The Dominion had agreed to this meeting only after months of negotiation. They had insisted on every possible security measure. They had demanded that Amara come alone, without weapons, without technology. She had agreed to all of it. She did not need weapons for what she was about to do. The Great Hall of the 12 Spheres was vast beyond imagination. 1,000 delegates sat in rising circles around a central platform. Representatives from every species in the Dominion, every conquered world, every subject people. At the highest point sat the High Tribunal, the rulers of the galaxy. Amara walked to the center of the platform. She looked small under the massive dome, a single human surrounded by the might of an empire. But she did not feel small. She felt the weight of 6 million Valari lives behind her. She felt the hope of every child who had been born on Earth in the past 5 years, human and Valari alike. She felt the dreams of every species that had ever wanted something better. She began to speak. 5 years ago, you sent us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. You called them criminals. You called them troublemakers. You expected us to break under their weight. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the hall. Instead, they made us richer. Not just in technology or economics, although that happened too. They made us richer in spirit. They taught us songs we had never heard. They showed our children stars we had never named. They helped us see ourselves more clearly. She paused, looking around at the assembled leaders. They made us better. And we made them better too. That is what happens when people help each other. Not weakness. Strength. Not division. Unity. High Tribune Kethver leaned forward in his seat. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were sharp, watching her every move. "We know why you are here," he said. "You want to spread your influence. You want to weaken our dominion? You want to start a war?" Amara shook her head. "No, I want to end one." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. The guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. But the device was not a weapon. It was a hologram projector. She pressed a button, and images filled the air above her. Children playing together, human and Valari, and a dozen other species. Scientists working side by side. Artists creating beauty. Families sharing meals. Strangers helping strangers. "This is what we have built," Amara said. "Not an empire. Not a government, a family. People who choose to live together, help each other, lift each other up." She turned slowly, making sure every delegate could see her face. "We do not want to fight you. We do not want to destroy your dominion. We want to show you something you forgot a long time ago. Something the Valari forgot too until they came to live with us." Her voice grew soft, but it carried to every ear. Different does not mean dangerous. Helping others does not make you weak. A hand offered in friendship will always build more than a fist raised in anger. She let the words hang in the air. Then she continued. "So this is our answer to your punishment? This is our response to your cruelty. Every species that wants to join us is welcome. Every refugee who needs a home will find one. Every tyrant who wants to change will find teachers. And every child, human or Valari, or any other kind, will grow up knowing that the universe is big enough for everyone." She looked directly at Kethver now. "You can keep your dominion. Rule your worlds with fear if you choose. But we will be here, on Earth, and wherever else people want to live freely. We will be building something else." "What is that?" Kethver asked, his voice hard. Amara smiled. "A family. One that has room at the table for anyone who wants to sit down." The hall was silent. 1,000 delegates held their breath. No one had ever spoken to the tribunal this way. No one had ever offered peace and freedom in the same breath. No one had ever suggested that the Dominion's way was not the only way. Then, from somewhere in the upper rows, someone began to clap. It was a young delegate, barely old enough to serve. She clapped slowly at first, then faster. Another delegate joined her. Then another. Then a dozen. Then 100. The tribunal sat frozen, as applause spread through the hall like fire. Not everyone clapped. Many delegates sat in silence, afraid of what would happen. But enough did. Enough to matter. Enough to prove that Amara's words had found their mark. Kethver raised his hand, and silence fell. His face was a mask, impossible to read. "You have said your piece," he said. "The tribunal will consider your words. You may leave." Amara bowed slightly. "Thank you for listening. That is all we ever wanted." She walked out of the hall with Mira at her side. Behind them, the delegates began to whisper among themselves. The tribunal huddled together in urgent conversation. The galaxy had shifted on its axis, and no one knew what would come next. On the ship home, Mara stood at a window and watched the stars. Mira joined her, and for a long time neither spoke. "Do you think it worked?" Mira finally asked. Amara shrugged. "I do not know. Empires do not fall from a single speech. It might take years. It might take generations, but we started something." "Yes," Amara nodded. "We started something." Back on Earth, life continued. The speech was broadcast to every screen, every device, every corner of the planet. People watched and cheered and cried. They shared it with their neighbors and their children and their friends. In Snow Paulo, Carlos, the firefighter, watched from his living room. Beside him sat a young Valari woman with glowing blue skin. She was the same little girl he had lifted from the cargo pod 5 years ago. She was grown now, studying to become a doctor. She called him Uncle. Did we do okay?" she asked, watching Amara speak. Carlos put his arm around her shoulders. "Yeah, little star. We did okay." Across the galaxy, the broadcast spread. Other species watched and wondered. Some dismissed it as human foolishness. Others felt something stir in their hearts, something they had forgotten how to name. On a mining planet at the edge of Dominion space, a young worker watched the speech on a cracked screen. When it ended, she looked at her friends, all different species, all exhausted from their labor. "Ubuntu," she whispered. They looked at each other. Then, one by one, they smiled. The Dominion did not fall that day. Empires do not crumble from a single speech, but the first cracks had appeared. The first seeds had been planted, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, hope was spreading like starlight. On Earth, the sun was setting. Valari children were heading home from school, walking hand in hand with their human friends. Scientists were packing up their labs, excited about tomorrow's experiments. Musicians were tuning their instruments for evening concerts. Families were sitting down to dinner, sharing food and stories and dreams. None of them knew exactly what the future would hold. None of them could see how the story would end, but they knew one thing for certain. They had answered cruelty with compassion. They had met hatred with love, and in doing so, had proven something that the galaxy would never forget. Humanity was not special because they were stronger or smarter than anyone else. They were special because when strangers fell from the sky, scared and hungry and alone, humans did not ask what they could gain. They asked what they could give. That was the human answer. That was the human way, and it changed everything.